Super Saiyan Blue was always treated like a final type transformation. God power combined with Super Saiyan control. On paper, this should have been the point where Dragon Ball stopped escalating, and at first it almost felt that way. But then, a pattern started repeating. Whenever the story hit its most critical moment, when the outcome of the fight actually needed to be decided, Super Saiyan Blue was there, but it was never the form that finished anything. And when an ultimate form keeps showing up like that, the problem usually isn't strength, it's something much deeper.
When Super Saiyan Blue was first revealed, the reaction wasn't confusion, it wasn't disappointment. For a lot of Dragon Ball fans, it was relief. Super Saiyan God had just introduced a completely new visual language for Goku. Slimmer body, calmer presence, almost fragile compared to what people were used to. Some fans liked that shift, others really didn't. And Dragon Ball has always understood one thing extremely well: visuals matter, especially when you're trying to sell the idea of power. Super Saiyan Blue immediately felt like a correction. Same classic Super Saiyan hairstyle, muscle mass back where people expected it to be, but now layered with godly ki, blue hair instead of gold. It looked powerful in a very familiar way, which is exactly why it worked so well at first glance. If you were a kid seeing this for the first time, there was no confusion. Blue meant stronger, new color meant higher level. Dragon Ball didn't even need to explain it much, the design did the talking. But visually selling power was only part of the reason Super Saiyan Blue existed. Narratively, it was doing something much more important. For the first time in a long time, Goku and Vegeta were being positioned as true equals. Throughout Dragon Ball Z, Goku and Vegeta were rarely positioned as true equals in the main story's progression. Even when Vegeta caught up, there was still a perceived ceiling, not always because of effort, but because of direction. At the time, Super Saiyan 3 was treated as Goku's transformation within the core continuity. There was no Daima, no indication that Vegeta had access to it, and no reason for fans to assume he ever would. So for the audience watching back then, the message was clear. Goku had reached a level Vegeta wasn't actively using in the story, and that difference mattered. It wasn't just about power, it was about positioning. Super Saiyan Blue erased that perception instantly. The moment Blue appeared, Super Saiyan 3 stopped being relevant to the rivalry. Vegeta didn't need it. Goku didn't rely on it. For the first time, both fighters stepped onto the same transformation, and that alone made Blue feel like a major turning point when it debuted. It wasn't just a new form, it was a reset button for their rivalry. This is why Resurrection F leans so heavily into Super Saiyan Blue. The movie is structured around the idea that Goku and Vegeta have reached a new tier together. Golden Frieza isn't there just to be another villain, he's there to test whether this new level actually means something. Two Saiyans, two God forms, one enemy who trained just enough to stand in their way. And on paper, it all works. Blue is introduced as controlled power, not wild rage like early Super Saiyan, not stamina-draining excess like Super Saiyan 3. The anime frames it as refined, the manga emphasizes ki control, guidebooks describe it as God ki used efficiently without leakage. Everything about Super Saiyan Blue suggests this is what mastery looks like. That framing matters because Dragon Ball transformations aren't just power upgrades, they're answers to problems. Super Saiyan answered Frieza, Super Saiyan 2 answered Cell, Super Saiyan 3 answered the idea that raw power alone could overwhelm anything, even if it came at a cost. Each form existed because the story demanded it. Super Saiyan Blue was supposed to answer a different question. What happens when Saiyans stop chasing rage and start chasing control? At least that was the idea. And in the beginning, Dragon Ball really wanted you to believe that Blue was the final step in that direction. The name alone, Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, practically screams completion. Even when the name was simplified to Super Saiyan Blue, the implications stayed the same. This wasn't a stepping stone. This was the perfected version of everything that came before. But here's where the cracks start to form, and they're subtle at first. If you look closely at Resurrection F, Super Saiyan Blue doesn't actually end the conflict. Frieza doesn't lose because Blue overwhelms him, he loses because he mismanages his stamina. Again, the same flaw that cost him the fight on Namek comes back to haunt him here. Blue doesn't decisively break Frieza, it waits him out. And when Vegeta finally gets his moment, when it actually looks like Super Saiyan Blue is about to deliver a clean narrative finish, the story swerves. Time rewinds, Goku steps in, Frieza dies, but not because Blue earned that ending in a straightforward way. That's not a failure yet, not on its own, but it plants a seed. The Universe 6 arc makes this impossible to ignore. This arc is important because it's the first time Super Saiyan Blue is used repeatedly without the safety net of a movie structure. No quick wrap-up, no isolated canon bubble. This is weekly Dragon Ball again, and now Blue has to function as a workhorse form. Visually, it still delivers. Goku's Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken moment against Hit is iconic, it's hype, it's loud, it's designed to make you lean forward. But look at the outcome. Goku doesn't win. He withdraws. The arc moves on without Blue being the deciding factor. Vegeta's showing is even telling. He goes in with Super Saiyan Blue, confident, aggressive, and gets shut down, hard. The form that was supposed to represent mastery doesn't protect him from being overwhelmed. Again, that doesn't mean Blue is weak, but it does mean something else. Blue isn't solving the problem in front of it. At this point, ask yourself something, and be honest. If Super Saiyan Blue is meant to be the perfected God form, why does the story already need workarounds? Why does it need Kaioken stacked on top? Why does it need quick exits, strategic withdrawals, or narrative pivots to move forward? Dragon Ball has never been shy of letting a transformation dominate when it's supposed to matter. Super Saiyan 2 didn't hesitate against Cell. It erased him. The story bent around that moment. Everything before it existed to justify it. Blue doesn't get that treatment. Instead, it keeps showing up and then stepping aside. The Zamasu arc makes this impossible to ignore. This should have been Super Saiyan Blue's arc. No new transformations, no sudden breakthroughs, just repeated use of Blue, refined through combat. The anime and manga both lean into this idea. Goku and Vegeta keep coming back stronger, smarter, more coordinated. For a while, it feels like this is exactly what Super Saiyan Blue was designed for, sustained God-level combat. And then, Zamasu fuses. Suddenly, all that refinement doesn't matter. Blue stops being enough. Strategy slows the bleeding, but it doesn't change the outcome. So the story reaches for fusion. Vegito Blue appears, and for a brief moment, it looks like Blue might finally get its defining victory. But it doesn't. The Potara fusion ends early. The rules change. The fight doesn't conclude in a way that validates Super Saiyan Blue as a finishing form. Once again, the arc resolves through something else entirely. And this is where a pattern becomes impossible to deny. Blue is always present, it's always active, it's always involved, but it never owns the climax. It never becomes the form that ends the story it's in. At some point, this stops being a coincidence. Dragon Ball starts treating Super Saiyan Blue less like an answer and more like a baseline, a default setting, the form characters used when they don't have something better yet. And that's a dangerous place for an ultimate transformation to end up in. Because once a form becomes default, it stops feeling special, it stops carrying narrative weight, it becomes background noise. And the more Blue is used that way, the more obvious its limitations become. Not limitations of power, but limitations of purpose. That's the real problem Super Saiyan Blue runs into. And by the time Dragon Ball reaches its later arcs, this problem can't be ignored anymore. But that realization doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in, slowly. And by the time the Tournament of Power arrives, Dragon Ball is forced to confront something it's been avoiding since Blue was introduced. Super Saiyan Blue was never built to finish the story. And in Next, that becomes painfully clear.
By the time Dragon Ball reached the Tournament of Power era, something quietly changed about how Super Saiyan Blue was being treated. It was no longer framed as the end result of divine training. It wasn't the peak anymore. It had become the starting point. The form characters switched into automatically, almost out of habit, before the real escalation even began. That shift matters more than most people realize. In earlier Dragon Ball arcs, the moment a new transformation appeared, the story slowed down. It gave that form space to dominate. Super Saiyan didn't just show up, it rewrote the balance of power. Super Saiyan 2 didn't just increase strength, it ended Cell. Even Super Saiyan 3, for all its flaws, was treated as something extreme, something costly, something you couldn't just pull out casually. Super Saiyan Blue didn't get that kind of respect.
In the lead-up to the Tournament of Power, Blue is everywhere. Sparring matches, warm-ups, demonstrations of strength. Goku uses it against Gohan. Vegeta uses it casually. Blue becomes a measuring stick, not a trump card. And the moment a supposed ultimate form becomes a measuring stick, it starts losing narrative gravity. This is where the scaling down defense usually comes in. You'll hear people say Goku and Vegeta are holding back, that they're matching their opponents, that Blue only looks weaker because it's being used carefully. But here's the problem with that explanation. Dragon Ball doesn't feel power levels, it shows them. And what it shows over and over is Blue struggling to assert dominance against opponents who, by every previous standard, should not be operating on that tier. Android 17 is the clearest example. He's not weak, but he's also not God-trained. He didn't train with Whis, he didn't master Divine Ki. And yet Blue treats him like a near equal in prolonged exchanges. The form that was meant to represent divine mastery is now trading blows instead of overwhelming. That doesn't just affect power perception, it affects expectation. When the Tournament of Power actually begins, Dragon Ball leans into this new reality completely. Super Saiyan Blue is no longer a moment, it's a tool. Goku shifts in and out of it constantly, Vegeta does the same. The transformation that was once marketed as the perfected God state is now treated like standard equipment. And this is where the story unintentionally exposes Blue's biggest weakness. Against Jiren, Super Saiyan Blue does nothing. Not regular Blue, not Blue stacked with Kaioken, not refined Blue, not disciplined Blue. Every version of it fails to move the needle. The fights are flashy, yes, the animation is intense, but the result is always the same. Blue cannot meaningfully challenge the arc's true final opponent. It doesn't force adaptation, it doesn't corner Jiren, it doesn't create a turning point. It stalls. And Dragon Ball knows it's stalling because it keeps trying to patch the problem instead of solving it. First comes Kaioken Blue, a risky multiplier stacked on top of a form that was already supposed to represent control. That contradiction alone says a lot. If Blue is mastery, why does it need reckless technique layered on top? Why does control need desperation to function? Then comes Vegeta's Super Saiyan Blue evolution. This form is often defended as Blue's redemption. Vegeta powers up, he looks bulkier, his aura intensifies, he defeats Topo. On the surface, it feels like the moment Blue finally proves itself. But look closer. Topo is a god of destruction candidate who is actively holding back. He's bound by tournament rules. He cannot kill. He cannot fully unleash his power without risking disqualification. Belmont has to push him to fight harder, not because he's losing control, but because he's restraining himself. Vegeta's victory is real, but it's conditional. It doesn't redefine the arc, it doesn't change the endgame. Against Jiren, the actual narrative wall, Blue evolution doesn't matter. Vegeta lands blows, but the story moves past him just as it always has. And that's the moment Dragon Ball stops pretending, because immediately after that, Super Saiyan Blue disappears from the conversation. Not gradually, not subtly, it simply gets replaced by something entirely different. Ultra Instinct. And here's the important part. Ultra Instinct doesn't replace Blue because it's stronger. It replaces Blue because it means something. Ultra Instinct isn't introduced as a transformation you can train for normally. It's framed as a state even gods struggle with. Whis explains it as movement without conscious thought. Beerus himself admits difficulty with it. The story positions it as something fundamentally outside the standard Saiyan progression. That alone should raise a question. If Super Saiyan Blue was meant to represent the perfected God form, why does Dragon Ball immediately leap beyond it into something even gods can't fully control? The answer becomes clearer when you look back at how Blue has been functioning up to this point. Blue doesn't challenge characters philosophically, it doesn't demand growth, it doesn't force internal change, it just increases output. And Dragon Ball has already told this story before. Raw power escalation without identity eventually hits a wall. That's what Super Saiyan 3 represented. Massive strength, terrible sustainability, limited narrative use. Blue was supposed to fix that. Instead, it inherited the same problem in a different form: overexposure.
Blue appears against too many opponents, it fights too many battles that don't matter, it gets pushed aside too many times at critical moments. Slowly, without a single dramatic failure, it loses the audience's trust. By the end of the Tournament of Power, the message is unmistakable. Super Saiyan Blue is not the future. It's the bridge. A necessary one, sure, but still temporary. And Dragon Ball doesn't even wait for the arc to end before proving that point. Ultra Instinct takes center stage. Blue becomes background noise, a fallback, something Goku and Vegeta revert to when they're not doing anything important. That's not how Ultimate Forms behave. Ultimate Forms end arcs. They don't get replaced mid-story. And if that still feels like coincidence, if it still feels like Blue just got unlucky with its matchups, then there's one more piece that makes the failure impossible to ignore: the Morrow arc. Because that's where Dragon Ball finally confirms what Blue really was, and why it was never going to be enough. By the time the Morrow arc arrives in the manga, Dragon Ball stops being subtle about what Super Saiyan Blue actually represents. There's no nostalgia cushioning this point anymore. No tournament rules, no staged exhibition fights, just survival, escalation, and consequences. And in that environment, Blue's limitations become impossible to ignore. At this stage in the story, Goku and Vegeta are no longer experimenting. They're no longer figuring things out. They are seasoned, god-level fighters who have already seen what lies beyond Super Saiyan Blue. And yet, Blue is still present, still used, still relied on, but never trusted. Against Morrow, Super Saiyan Blue isn't framed as a solution. It's framed as a delay tactic, something to buy time, something to keep the fight going long enough for something else to happen. The story no longer pretends Blue can end the conflict. It doesn't even try. Instead, Dragon Ball makes a very deliberate choice. It shows Blue being refined and still failing. In the manga, Goku's control over Blue improves significantly. He minimizes energy loss. He uses the form efficiently. This is Blue at its theoretical best, exactly what it was always meant to become. And yet, even at peak efficiency, it isn't enough. Morrow adapts, overpowers, pushes past it. That moment matters because it removes every remaining excuse. This isn't sloppy usage. This isn't emotional instability. This is Blue functioning exactly as designed and still coming up short. That's when Dragon Ball finally draws a hard line. Goku doesn't push Blue further. He doesn't stack another multiplier. He doesn't invent a new variant. He abandons the path entirely. Ultra Instinct isn't introduced here as a surprise anymore. It's treated as the only viable direction forward. Not because it's stronger in a conventional sense, but because it operates on a completely different rule set. It isn't about forcing more power through the same framework. It's about changing how combat itself works. And that distinction is everything. Super Saiyan Blue is still a Saiyan form at its core. It's still about output. Control, yes, but control in service of more strength. Ultra Instinct rejects that idea altogether. It removes the conscious decision-making that Blue depends on. It bypasses the very system Blue was built to perfect. That alone tells you what Dragon Ball thinks of Blue at this stage. But Vegeta's path makes the failure even clearer. Instead of refining Blue further, Vegeta abandons it as an end goal. He doesn't seek a Blue evolution too. He doesn't double down on God Key mastery in the same way. He takes an entirely different route. Destruction energy, pain as fuel, risk instead of restraint. Ultra Ego exists because Blue could never accommodate Vegeta's identity. Blue demanded emotional suppression. Vegeta thrives on confrontation. Blue required efficiency. Vegeta grows through damage. No amount of refinement was ever going to fix that mismatch. And this is where the final realization locks into place. Super Saiyan Blue didn't fail because it lost fights. It failed because it had nowhere left to go. Dragon Ball transformations don't disappear when they're weak. They disappear when they're narratively complete, when they've already expressed everything they're capable of expressing. Blue reached that point faster than people want to admit. Look back at its role across the entire series. It never introduces a new philosophy of combat. It never forces Goku or Vegeta to change who they are. It never reshapes the story's direction. It equalizes, it stabilizes, it holds the line, and that's it. That's why it shows up everywhere but defines nothing. That's why it's used against side threats, mid-tier opponents, and transitional conflicts. That's why it's present during important arcs, but absent from decisive moments. That's why it's always there and never central. Dragon Ball doesn't abandon Super Saiyan Blue suddenly, it phases it out quietly, because by the time Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego appear, Blue has already done its job. It bridged the gap between mortal and divine. It rebalanced Goku and Vegeta. It stabilized the power scale long enough for the story to move forward. But bridges are not destinations, and Dragon Ball treats Super Saiyan Blue exactly like that. A necessary step, a visually striking one, an important one, but not an ending. That's why even now, Blue still exists in the story. It hasn't been erased, it hasn't been retconned, it just isn't trusted when everything is on the line. When Dragon Ball needs a form to finish a conflict, it doesn't reach for Blue, it reaches beyond it. And once you see that pattern, not in one arc, not in one fight, but across the entire structure of Super, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. Super Saiyan Blue was never meant to be the final answer. It was meant to be the last comfortable one. So here's the real question. Do you think Super Saiyan Blue failed because Dragon Ball misused it, or because it was always designed to be temporary, whether fans were ready for that or not? That answer depends on how you see the entire era. And that's exactly why this debate never really ends.